Hey guys, it's Iskamar, and if you happen to be an old grizzled MMO vet in search of a home or at least a temporary place to rest, then today's video might be of some assistance. I've been meaning to make a video about this for a while, and I just want to let more people know about what I would consider sort of a hidden gem, and that is the Warhammer private server called Return of Reckoning. I think for a lot of you that want an MMO that has some staying power and where community is important, that this, at the very least, deserves a spot on your hard drive. Last year, while navigating the MMO drought we've been enduring and waiting for the dumpster fire of Bless to go into early access, I stumbled upon Return of Reckoning, and I think I had installed it a long time ago when it first came out because I remember being like, oh yeah, I forgot there was a Warhammer private server. And I also remember trying to convince one of my guild members to play it with me back then, and he adamantly refused. So of course I did the logical thing and went right back to try and convince him to install it again. This time, shockingly, he was able to be persuaded. I guess many years of shitty MMOs can have that effect on you. Anyways, he never played Warhammer back in the day because he was balls deep in Age of Conan at the time, so he didn't have any nostalgia factor pulling him in. But after playing for a while and doing a bunch of tier 1 PvP on various classes, he ended up spending much more time playing the game than me or any of my other guild members had installed. We ultimately quit to go play Bless, and even though we were both musing that it would end up being a big mistake and that ROR was most likely going to be way better, we still went and played it anyways, and of course we ended up being very right. But by the time we were done with Bless, things got a little rocky for the ROR private server, because I believe another private server popped up and was trying to capitalize off of some of the ongoing drama with the devs, and as well as advertise a more true Warhammer experience that wasn't ruled with an iron fist. So the population fell off a bit for ROR, but by the end of the year, with the release of a lot of new features, the game's population surged again, and even when my guild and I were in our honeymoon phase with Lost Ark Online, we were starting to get the itch again to install ROR for its PvP. So why do I like Return of Reckoning? Well, first of all, it is a classic MMO server with a tight-knit community. The game's population isn't splintered or segmented through a lot of anti-social content like you would see in a BFA, to where you're basically in a lobby game that's dressed up like an MMO. And there isn't a bunch of LFG-based content to where you join matchmaking, get put with a group, and then get teleported to a dungeon. No, you're gonna have to get in and you're gonna have to interact with the community, and the community works together, and a lot of people are really helpful. I mean, I'll just be sitting there in town sometimes and people will just open up trade with you and hand you gear or potions or things. So the community is really willing to help out newcomers. As far as what I do in the game, I have not leveled the cap yet. I've played a shit ton of ROR and I have not even got to cap. That is because I just do tier 1 PvP, which is level 1 through 15. After you hit 16, if you try to enter the tier 1 zone, you'll turn into a chicken. You can't PvP at level 16, you have to go on to the next tier. And for me, Warhammer tier 1 is like the ultimate twink playground, and it's done in a good way in my opinion. That's because the way you level out keeps twinks from becoming oppressive. Like, you're not going to have a twink that's 100% decked out that will never leave. So it makes it really inefficient and not cost effective to sit there and just gear the shit out of a twink, because he's eventually going to level out, and very fast if you have against all odds. Like, if you're outnumbered and you're getting a lot of kills, you're going to level very fast. So while it's fun to twink and you'll still pour some money and gear into a character, you're not going to go above and beyond, because eventually that character is just going to be a waste. But yeah, man, the game just has the classical MMO roles, and the class design's done pretty well. The class designer from this game went on to do class design for Rift Online, so there's definitely some really cool mechanics here. And I know balance was a shit show with Warhammer when it first released, but I still think that a lot of the underlying mechanics were really cool and really well done. And it's really no surprise to me that balance was a mess for the game whenever it was only developed in like 3 years. You had EA just pushing that shit out the gate as fast as they could. But in tier 1, melee design is really good, and it feels like how melee should operate in this sort of game. It's not like a lot of newer MMOs to where melee is just flying all over the place. You have melee knocking your fucking head off with their gap closers and shit. If you lock down a melee, it doesn't matter because they'll just use one of their million gap closers to jump on you. In tier 1, I don't think there's any gap closers in melee. Instead, the focus is put on sprints and movement speed buffs, and I really like that. I really enjoy it. They're really impactful, movement speed is, and snares are really impactful. A lot of the melees have a lot of risk reward mechanics attached to them, and they're just really fun to play. My personal favorite is the Slayer class, and then you have the tanks, and tanks are really important. And you can build tanks differently. You can go full on sword and board and just really put a lot of defensive stats in and just try to keep your team up and throw down team support, and you're going to be throwing your guard mechanic around. You're going to be shifting your guard to different players, and guard basically makes y'all share an HP pool. So tanks are really integral in helping keep your group alive, but tanks can also build damage too, and they can just be like a juggernaut that's just putting out consistent sustained DPS, and you're just not going to want to have one of those on your face. Healers are well designed as well, and they're not just about spamming heals. Some of the healers, like the shaman or the archmage, are designed around damage mechanics. So they basically have like a yin-yang balance mechanic to where if you're using your damage spells, it'll empower you towards healing, and then if you start using your healing, it'll shift you back towards damage. So you're just doing that constant dance. But anyways, the game just has a lot of old MMO flavor that doesn't exist anymore. For example, in order to basically upkeep our twinks, we have to have some good gold economy going. And one of the best ways to make gold in tier 1 is through the lair bosses. So in each PvP zone, there's a hidden lair, and at random times the lair bosses will spawn, and the loot that drops there is really coveted, either for people that are going to just throw it on like a tier 1 twink, or for the people that are going to use it as transmogs at level cap. So it's actually really good gold. But since it's in a contested zone, you have this whole dynamic of people trying to go and check and scout the bosses and sneak them before the other faction finds out. So you'll sometimes be in there about to group and fight it, and you'll find the other faction scouting you out, and you'll just have battles that go over the lair bosses, and it's just really fun. And it's just something that you don't see in MMOs anymore. And as far as tier 1 world PvP goes, you do it in 3 different zones. My personal favorite is the dwarf and greenskin zone. I think it's the best for higher populations. For tier 1, it's the best zone in tier 1. Nordland is good whenever the server's low pop, but it can get way overcrowded and you'll just have like big globs of zergs fighting each other. Whereas in dwarf, the zone spacing is a lot better. Plus I like the environment, and there's just a lot of good places for fights. But anyways, if you're me playing in NA, the population can be hit or miss for tier 1 PvP. For the most part, if the population's above 70, you're going to have a good time. Even 50 to 60 players is good if they're not just AFK and they're actually out fighting. But for tier 2, I would say that the average population for NA times is probably around 200 to 300 players, so that's a good amount. But yeah, man, I've just been having a lot of fun with this game. It's if you can enjoy PvP and if you can enjoy classical MMO combat, then I think you should give this game a try. There's still a pretty high skill cap. If you're really well organized and you're running as 3 people, you can wipe much bigger groups if you execute properly. There's a lot of OP group combos to make, and to be honest, all the classes feel really strong. It's really more about building the right group synergies. And me and my guild, we play cross factions, so the way we do that is a lot of people will do that in a really annoying way and they'll swap to the winning side, but we swap to the lower population side so we can get guaranteed good fights. The only problem with that is you'll level way too fast if you're trying to do tier 1 PvP exclusively. And on top of that, there is a huge variety of PvP battlegrounds. It's really crazy how many battlegrounds there are in this game, and yeah, some of them are hit or miss, but there's a lot of really good ones, and they all have very different environments. Most of them are really fun. I would say there's a couple that are pretty meh, but the good far outweighs the bad. I guess to boil it down, the game just really feels like an MMO. There's a thriving community and players are having to work together, and you're you're just not off doing your own little thing. You're actually working with other players towards a goal, and you really have to interact with your community. It feels like something that's just missing on the market these days. And yeah, there's been some drama with the server's devs. I was honestly gonna say that I can't criticize them too much because they continue to update the game, they continue to bring in new features, and they're doing a good job at keeping a dead game alive and allowing there to be something of worth out there for us MMO players. But I did have a little run-in with them last night. And what happened was one of my guild members ended up getting banned. He got perma-banned from the server because of his names. Like, he had 6 characters with just really stupid names. They were dumbass, like, middle school humor names, but they weren't really in violation of TOS. They weren't racially charged. They weren't directed at anyone. They weren't offensive politically. They're just stupid sexual shit like masturbation or stuff like that. Just really dumbass names. And he ended up getting permabanned with no warning. So I do have to criticize them a bit here. I think they do rule the server with an iron fist, and that would be my one critique of this server, is that there is this stigma that the devs can be a bit overboard with the ban hammer, and perhaps this is true. I would say if any of them were watching this, I would say pick and choose your battles. Ultimately, this is your sandbox. This is your playground that you're building. But none of that matters if you don't have people to play with. And if you keep giving the real trolls ammo about how you run the server, then it almost makes it kind of true towards the people that are potentially looking to play this. So I'd just say pick and choose your battles. I don't think names, unless they're really offensive towards people, are something that should be targeted. But that's just me. You're not running a live service, and you're just trying to have a community where people can play and enjoy a game that's not on the market anymore. So focus on the real people that are disrupting the gameplay. But anyways, that's all I have for that. Other things that I enjoy about the game, I have a lot of nostalgia for the Warhammer world. I remember doing my first PQ and just being amazed. And the world just really pulls at my heartstrings. Even though it's really dated in this day and age, it's still just enjoyable to traverse through it. I would say one thing that is far ahead of its time with this game is the UI. To this very day, I don't think there's a tab target game that is this sophisticated or as sophisticated as Warhammer's is. The way the UI can be moved and customized perfectly to what you really want to get out of it. And not only that, you can have offensive and defensive targets at the same time. So you can have your defensive focus and your offensive focus, and it's not any special keybind or anything. The game will store your defensive target and it'll store your offensive target. And there's actually skills that are designed around this. Like if you're a healer and you're putting certain dots up on people, it's gonna send percentage healing to your defensive target. Or there's buffing systems that work on dealing damage to people in order to give your allies buffs. So there's a lot of really cool design built around that. And I just really think that's one thing that's underlooked with Warhammer, is how far ahead of its time its UI was. Other than that, the game has charm. It has a real community that is important. It's not without its faults, but I think at this point there really isn't a lot of great options out there that really stress community. And my opinion is that the game is great for waiting for the future titles that are going to end up ultimately disappointing you. It just really deserves that spot on your hard drive so that while you're waiting for whatever game, you could be playing this and having fun. But if that game ends up not panning out, you have a fallback. I think this game is a perfect carryover, a perfect fallback, and for some people, this is good enough to be their main game. But anyways, that's it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope y'all check the server out. I'll drop the link down in the description.